Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knutson.
And I am Mike Brown. It's time to dim the lights and settle in. Come along with us on this week's adventure across the pond this time.
Yes, across the pond, and all the way over to the United Kingdom in Suffolk. And we are headed to an incredible place, very historical place, Fort Landguard.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And our guest is Penny. What's her last name again, Morgan? Good Lord, that's a lot of stuff.
It's Penny Griffiths-Morgan.
That's such a British name.
Isn't it such a British name? And I love her. She and I have known each other for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And she is an incredible historian that has a fantastic podcast called Haunted Histories and blog and books and everything else. But that's her forte is history and incredible paranormal phenomenon that goes with it. And
prolific.
It's so good. And this fort, just to give everybody a heads up, this is where we're going today. Y'all can picture this. It has a rich military history, 450 years worth, and it's basically been in existence since about 1543, give or take. It was built during the reign of King Henry VIII to protect the rivers around it. So this place has been kind of forgotten in a way. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but man, it should.
There you go. Well, let's get into this with Penny Griffiths-Morgan.
Let's do it, because boy, is it going to be a fun ride. This is going to be such a great topic to cover because this is one area of the UK that I find really, really fascinating. It's a location that I think maybe a lot of people in the West might not know, but definitely the people there know. And I can't think of anybody better to talk about it other than Penny Griffiths-Morgan, because she is the person, the go-to about anything haunted history. So Penny, thank you so much for coming today.
Yes, you put such a smile on my face with that, Morgan. Thank you.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Your research is so good, and you've got such your own history with this location. So yes. I'm super excited about this, and I can't wait for you to share it with everybody. But I want, first of all, for you to set the stage as to where we're going today, because we're taking a trip with you. So where we're going and what this place is, give us the rundown. This is a really cool spot.
Okay, so I want you to picture a map of England. And whilst you're picturing that map of England, when you're looking at it, the bit that looks like its bum is sticking out, we're going there. That's the easiest way to explain it. It's twerking at us. If you go down to the bottom of this bottom, where there's like a slight sort of channel going in, we're going there. It's a place called Felixstowe, which is probably best known in the UK now as being a very, very large docks. It's one of our biggest docks in the UK. However, it's not always been a docks. And right next to where the dockyard actually is, which also has its own interesting history, which I will touch on if I get a chance, is a place called Landguard Fort. And no sort of breaching of trading standards or whatever, it is what it says it is. It is a fort. It's a very large fort. And it's been there. There has been some kind of fortification on that site since the time of a man in history who I despise, and I wish we never had to mention his name, but Henry VIII.
Boy.
Back in the they reckon 1530s, although the first recorded sort of descriptions of what he put there was in 1547, were two what are known as bullocks or bulwarks, and these would have been earthen sort of establishments, and they were the two of them were hexagonal shaped, and they were there to protect the coast from invasion. And at the time, the people that England, were most scared of would have been those pesky Spanish. Those pesky Spanish that sent their armada to us during his second daughter's reign and all that kind of thing. But he was the one that started building these kind of fortifications. Landguard isn't probably his most famous one. His more famous ones are down right on the south coast with what they called the Cinque ports, like the 5 ports. But he was the one who originally started building some kind of guard at this point. Fast forward 70, 80 years, we've got James I. He's also a bit concerned about the Spanish because even though Queen Elizabeth I had beaten them back quite, in the heart of a lion in this woman and everything else. And that speech also, and I'm paraphrased it, but that speech also took place in Essex at somewhere called Tilbury Fort. We have another one built, and it was James I who started to build the first, if you like, brick fortification on this very site.
Wow.
So it goes back a long way. A lot of our forts in the UK, people look at Landguard and think it's one of these what they call Palmerston forts, i.e. forts that these ones were built during the Victorian era. That was the very, very sort of common ones, and just before the Victorian era during the Napoleonic Wars, 19th century. But this one does, its roots date back to the 16th century. And it's one of the few, there's not many, that can say its heritage is that old.
Yeah.
Now, I could give you lots more information from the get-go, but you let me know what you want to know, because otherwise I'll probably send people to sleep talking about its heritage.
I don't think you could ever send anybody to sleep, especially with this history, because I mean, you guys have a far richer history than we do here in Canada. In Canada, it's limited. I mean, we only look back about 100 or so years.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot that's documented in that regard. But this place has really been considered one of the most haunted buildings at least in East England. There's been so many numerous reported pieces of paranormal phenomenon that's gone on there over the years. But what drew you to this? What was your initial connection to this?
Well, I'll be honest, 10 years ago, I didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
I probably started investigating in earnest. I believed in it since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. But I genuinely didn't know you could do investigations. And so my story goes that it was about 12 years ago. 12 years ago, and I was doing a night feed with my youngest child, and he was not a particularly easy feeder. There's a reason I'm telling this story. I'm not just wanting to sort of talk about feeding babies and everything.
Proud mum.
There is a reason. And he would take ages to feed, and rather than wake my husband up, who had to get up early for work, and I was taking maternity leave, I would come downstairs into the living room, try and find something to watch at 2 o'clock in the morning on the telly, and just sit there chill while it took half an hour for the baby to feed. And I stumbled across this program with these Americans with these really strange accents that took me some time to actually get my ear into what they were saying. And I'll tell you which program it was in a minute. And once I got my ear in, I thought, this is really interesting. So I set to record it so that on subsequent nights I could watch it back when I was doing the 2-3 o'clock feed. Well, the program was Ghost Asylum. It was the Tennessee Wraith Chasers. And I'm watching them and they're using all these cool gadgets. And I was like, those gadgets look so cool. It's not just, you can just stand in a room and ask the spirit to do something or whatever. I'm simplifying it here, obviously. Or you got these gadgets you can ask them to turn on and off, and pretty lights and everything else. And I was telling my husband a couple of days later, like, look, you can do ghost hunting with gadgets and stuff. And he goes, well, why don't you do it then? And so I was like, okay. And so I actually got on the internet, like anyone looking for a trainee ghost hunter, literally. And that's where it started. And so when I did actually meet a couple of the guys from I've met a few of the guys from Tennessee Wraith Chasers, past and present, and I've told them it's all their fault. They created this monster. It's really down to them. It's a true story. And it was probably about a year or so after I'd started my podcast, Haunted Histories, and a couple of paranormal companies said, do you want to, if you interview us to promote our event, like the location, would you like to come on a ghost hunt to the location? And I'm like, sounds fair. And one of them was Landguard Fort. It was with a group called Fright Nights. And so I went over there, and once I found it, because it's not the easiest place to find. I mean, the thing is, flipping huge. But to find the access road to it, it's a bit of a... The sat-nav takes you down a dead end. You have to kind of go against what the sat-nav says. And when I found it, I was like, wow, this place is very cool, because it's gone through so many metamorphoses over its... It does look like a Victorian fort now. In fact, it does have VR, Victoria Regina, outside it. But I just thought this place is so cool, and it's so big you can just wander around it and forget where other bits are. It's not... Whereas somewhere like over the estuary, because it's basically on the mouth of the River Orwell. But on the other side, and so it's classed as Suffolk. On the other side is something called Harwich Redoubt, which is the one more people know about, even though it's, I'd say, a fifth of the size. And that's in a place called Harwich, which is classed as Essex. So I knew of Harwich, but I didn't know of Landguard. Anyway, so this group said, would you like to come and be our special guest? Because I was starting to make a little bit of a name of myself. And they said, could you do a bit of a history tour? So I wrote this script, like a history blog script. I was walking around before, it was still daylight, before any of the public got there. And one of the trainee investigators was like, can I come around with you? And I was like, yeah, all right. I was just exploring, because I'd never been to this place, didn't know what it had to offer. I've done the history research, but I don't do the ghost research. I never look up ghost stories for places. I tend to go in with just the history. And we're outside this room, and I call it the ablutions block, because... Not being silly or anything, but along this row there's like this bathhouse, so it's got two very, very old steel bars in it, and this room has been active for me ever since. And then along from it you've got some toilets, and then along from it you've got another shower block. Anyway, we were standing, me and this chap was asking me some questions, and all of a sudden inside this room we hear somebody go like that loud.
Oh, wow.
And I just went, oh, and he went, oh my God. And I was like, you're not going to run, are you? And he's like, oh my God. And I went straight in, because, you hear a noise, you follow it.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. I am not a runner. I'm not a runner. I'd probably go to my own death if I thought it was a haunted noise. Anyway, you think I'm joking. Anyway, the next thing I heard...
I'm right with you.
Well, there we run to our death together, holding hands, Morgan, like the brave souls that we are.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So then behind me, as I was sort of looking around, it's not a big room, but it had two steel bars in it. I heard this scuffling noise, like someone's feet were scuffling on the gravel inside the room. And I turned round thinking that Scaredy Cat had followed me, and he was like 10 foot away from the door. He wouldn't come near it. But then so I heard this scuffling noise, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I thanked them and said, I'll be coming back later if you want to communicate with me. All the polite kind of nice stuff. And then another thing, there's when you go up onto the bastions, they've got a clock there, and you have to go. It's not an enclosed. Well, it's a kind of an enclosed area you walk through. Time stood still. Pardon the pun, seeing as there's a clock there. Honestly, I felt like I was battling through like a thick gunk to try and get through, and the Scaredy Cat was at the far end, and he goes, "Just come through. What are you doing?" I couldn't get through. I was, something was holding me, and I was like pushing. He said he could see me pushing against it and shaking my head. I couldn't get through.
How do you explain that? Like, what can you tell yourself about that? Because that's an interesting experience.
I tried it again a few years later to see if I had a similar nothing. I'm just wondering if it was some kind of, and I'm not a technical researchy person. I'm a historian who likes to do investigations. But the only thing I could think of is, was it almost like a time slip? Was time sort of readjusting itself and stopping me stepping into the wrong bit? I don't know.
Interesting.
Because time slips have been reported there, where people have actually felt like they've stepped back 100 years.
What are they experiencing, or what have you heard that they're experiencing? Is it like, are they seeing things? Are they sensing things? Like what are they reporting?
Like they're hearing the noises of guns going off, and the port. I said that there was the docks, Felixstowe Port, which is right next door, is loud 24/7. It doesn't stop. They've said those noises, there were none. It was quiet. It's never quiet.
Interesting.
If you're, I mean, you can get quiet if you go into the tunnels and things like that. But if you're in the open part of the fort, you've constantly got the noise from the docks going on. And they've sort of said that they couldn't hear any noise from the docks. All they could hear was sort of gunfiring, men yelling. And it was like they'd stepped back a few hundred years and were experiencing whatever had gone on there. And I just started to think, I love this place. This place has got so much to give, just from a history, because the interesting thing was, when I was prepping for this investigation, and I was, because I knew I was going to be given a bit of a history talk, I did my deep diving, you know, the one where you disappear for 6 hours, and if anyone tries to talk to you, their hand just goes up, and, you know, that one. And I discovered they'd recently released details of a mission, an operation that took place from Landguard in World War II. And these details had only just been released. Something called Operation Outward, which was to do with releasing balloons, almost like mini weather balloons. They released nearly 100,000 of them, and half of them had these mini incendiary devices on. The other half had steel wires. So the incendiary devices, they were all being pushed over to Germany. The incendiary devices were to cause the crops to burn. You know, they weren't big enough to damage houses, but they would start fires in crops, and the steel wires were to short electricity wires out. And the theory was the cost it took to produce them was actually far, far less than the cost it took to the German Luftwaffe to try and shoot them down before. And these details had only really just come out when I was putting this history talk together. So I was really excited about finding that out. Nobody, even the historian at the fort, was like, I didn't know about that. Oh, there you go. That's why I'm good at what I do. I find this stuff. But so this place, and I was just like, I really like it. That was just a few of the things that happened to me on that first visit. Anyway, it's probably about an hour's drive away from where I live in Essex. And about 3 months later, it was the summer. I had two young sons at that point. One would have been about 8, and the other one nearly 4. And the younger one, he's autistic. And at the time, he was very, very selectively verbal. He had a very, very limited vocabulary. He very rarely spoke. There's a reason I'm telling you that. So we went back there, and my oldest son, who's now nearly 16, he does investigations with me. He's learning. You know, I'm training him to be a run into the fire type investigator. You know, one of those ones, he's going to meet his death with me or get possessed beforehand. I'm not sure which. And, there's a lot of British humour in this. I'm sorry about that.
I love it. No, that's perfect. You're right on my same page here, Penny. I'm telling you.
That's why I love Canadians. They get my humour.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I going to say? Anyway, but at this time, they both were too young to know what I did, what sort of things happened to me, everything else. So the 3-4-year-old, he would not have known any of this. Anyway, so I thought, middle of the day, broad daylight, summer, we took them to the fort because there's loads of stairs, big open space, they can run around, they're boys, they could tire themselves out. And I went for a walk, and my youngest one, he wanted to come with me. And so I went up to this ablutions room, the one with the 2 baths that I mentioned, just to see if anything happened. Just to see. No noises. I didn't really get any feeling of anything. But then my little boy is stood there waving to the corner of the room. And I said to him, dude, what are you waving at? And he went, Soldier Man, corner. And I'm like, what? I mean, it doesn't scare me, any of this, but I was like, what? And I goes, what does he look like? And he's like, don't know, because he couldn't describe it. Anyway, so I got some photos of soldiers. Broad spectrum of soldiers. He pointed to a World War I soldier. Definitely, he said, that was him. That's what he looked like. Nice man. And was waving at him. Now, being autistic, one of the things he can't do is he can't make stuff up. He finds it... I can tell when he's trying to make something up.
Yeah.
It sounds a weird thing to say, but he does try, bless him. I mean, he's 11 now. He does try, but he can't do it. He just can't do it. So I started looking up sort of ghost stories of the place. The other thing that happened, we were in the tunnels at the casements where they would have stored, obviously, the gunpowder and the weapons and everything. And all 4 of us were together, so my husband, myself, both sons. And we heard quite distinctly what sounded like a sack being dragged. You know, like a Hessian sack being dragged. Yeah. I ran off to follow the noise, as you do, and to see if there was because I thought it was a dead end. I thought this corridor had a dead end. And I thought, maybe there's somebody at the far end doing some work on the museum, and that's where the noise came from, because it echoed. Nope, dead end. Nobody could have got in there without us seeing them, and there was nobody else in there. So, and that was just broad daylight. And I just thought, if this place has so much to give that it's giving me something every time I come, I need to learn more about this place. I need to invest some time. And I did find out that there is a rumour that a World War I soldier took his own life there, in that, where those baths are. He supposedly hanged himself. However, I can't find that it's never had a name attached to it, the story. And I can't find a name. Now, there have been, and I'm sorry if it upsets anyone using the word, there have been suicides there, but not one that specifically fits the story of the World War I soldier. But there have been soldiers. There was a soldier in 1914 who took his own life there.
To me, oh yeah, no, go ahead, Penny.
Sorry, I was going to say, and that's another story in its own right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, everything that you're describing, I mean, is, apart from the time slip incident, if that's what it was, it really screams place memory to me. Just the ability of this building, whatever it is, to seemingly hang on to stuff that's happened there in terms of sights, sounds, visions, all of those things that we kind of see with these historical, often with these historical places, especially ones that seem to be made out of the older building fabrics. That seems to be something that happens more with those older buildings versus even the newer ones, even though I've had it happen in cases with the newer ones. But that it screams this phenomenon. So for listeners that aren't aware of the term place memory, it's a term in parapsychology that references the idea that the environment can almost act like a needle on a phonograph, so that it's not necessarily like anybody is stuck there or anything like that, but it's like the building itself or the area is kind of replaying these events, and as long as you're tuned into it, then you can pick up on these different like sounds, sights, all of these things, and that to me, that's what this screams. But I want to touch back on your son, because there's been a lot in the media over the last little while about the relationship of like telepathy and autism, and maybe the ability for a lot of autistic kids to be a little bit more tuned into some of this stuff. Like, do you want to like touch on that a little bit? Because I don't want to like gloss over that.
No, it's fine. I've had this conversation with him because he's picked up on things, and whilst he gets a bit scared by it, he doesn't fully sort of comprehend what's going on. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few years I wouldn't take him on an investigation with me. He's 11. He would struggle to handle it, but you can't control if somebody wants to talk to him. I can't control if he's going to see something that not everyone can see. So it's making sure that if that does happen to him, he tells me, and he's like, "Oh, Mum, by the way, there's a man standing over there. He looks okay, but I just thought I'd tell you. That's what I want him to do." I don't know. It was interesting, actually, going off subject slightly. I was in my day job, because I do actually have a day job. I give people financial advice for going into full-time care. And I've had quite a few experiences in care homes that I can't debunk, shall we say. But I've been doing it for a long time. But interestingly, I was chatting to one of the owners of one of the newer care homes I've taken over, and he's very interested in all this. And he's worked in care ever since he was like 18, and I think he's mid-50s now. We were talking about this, and I was saying about, autism, and he said his experiences of autism are very similar to that with dementia, when it comes to having some kind of, I suppose for want of a better term, spiritual enlightenment. That he has a lot of people with dementia who see things that other people can't see, and it's always put down to its hallucinations, it's their brain failing and everything. But I wonder if that's what it is, or is it because their brain is firing differently? It's dropping that inhibition thing. It's the same as young children up to about the age of 5, when people say they've got an imaginary friend and they're like, "Oh, that's nice." It may not be an imaginary friend. It may be a real person who they're able to see because they haven't got that sort of, their brain does not yet say it doesn't exist. So it's enabling that third eye, or whatever the term would be. And I've seen that a lot with people with dementia as well, that they've dropped that sort of what you're allowed to see and what you're not. And one of the beauties of a spectrum, being, people on the spectrum, is they have no filter.
It's so true.
They don't have that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I actually love it being around, because my son does go to a specialist autistic spectrum disorder school. And I love going in to visit them. The kids have me in stitches. I not in a kind of a nasty way. They want me to laugh. I'm not laughing at them like they're a freak show. They're making me laugh, but it's the fact that they say, and I can be just as honest with them. Like if one of them, he always wears shorts. Whether it's -10 outside, he has to wear shorts. And I just turned around to him once and I said, "Don't your legs freeze?" And he went, "No, they're hairy, so they keep warm." And I was just like, "Yeah, okay." But I could be just as, and I love that. I love that kind of. I mean, sometimes some of the things they say to you do have to have a bit of a thick skin. But I like that, and but I find very, very similar with some of the people I look after and deal with who've got dementia. They have that very, so I do, and it's interesting coming from someone who cares for people with dementia and has looked after older people with autism as well, that he found the same sort of comparison. So, I mean, I'm not a neurologist, I don't know why, but yes, I do think that there is something to do with I've also experienced it with people with Down syndrome. They seem to have a same thing, that they see things that other people don't see, and I do wonder if it's because they fire differently. The thing that maybe fires to block that third sight, whatever it is, misfires past it, so they see it.
Well, there's a really interesting study out in that came out of Ontario. This was a number of years ago now, by a doctor by the name of Dr. Morris Friedman. And this is, so for audience listening, that you guys can go and look this up. It's really, really interesting. He actually did research on exactly what you're talking about, Penny. Where he was looking at patients that have either had brain injury or Alzheimer's, and I don't think he included autism spectrum in the study, but it was brain damage and Alzheimer's. And what was really, really interesting about that, and what you're saying, is that his conclusion, to make a long story short, was that the idea was that there was the brain has a whole pile of filters. Like, we work with filters, almost like a camera works with filters in it. And if you take the filters out of the camera, you're not going to get a very good picture. You're not going to get a very good representation of what you're seeing, because if you're taking the filters out, you're taking the UV filter out, and you're taking like all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so what his theory and what his study focused on was the idea that when you take those filters out, or like whether it be through a brain injury or something like that, something's happened to the brain, is that it actually opens up and removes a bit of the filter. And that's why some people are having these experiences and maybe seeing things that other people aren't seeing, is because it's part of the filter that kind of allows us to tune out the environment, or certain spectrums of the environment is actually removed. It's really, really interesting. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to know about it, Dr. Morris Friedman, very, very interesting piece of research. But yeah, no, I just,
I'm an academic. I am an academic after all. I just never written it down.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
No, it's just really, to me, it's very interesting, because I think, again, it comes back to the Fort Landguard, like what we're talking about, just to kind of like pull us back onto track. But when we're going into places like this, and the different perceptions that you can have, and people are saying, man, like I saw this, and you could have maybe 2 or 3 other people that either saw something different or saw or maybe didn't see anything at all. We have to realize that I think our perceptions do vary. And it doesn't necessarily mean that perception is wrong.
No.
It just means that maybe our perception is a bit different. We're getting like little pieces of a greater big elephant in the room, I guess.
Well, I think of it like when you hear a piece of music. If it's I'm into rock music, like loads of stuff going on. You got the guitars going, you got the bass going, you got the drums going, you got the vocals going. I might hear a certain part of it, and that's what appealed to me. Maybe it's the bass line that really I can hear predominant, like at the top, whereas somebody else listening, maybe they're hearing the rhythm guitar more, and everyone has a, like you said, I'm just thinking of perception. Everyone perceives something slightly different. I mean, I agree with what you're saying about Landguard, that it's kind of a replay, but I have had interactive experiences there as well. I have.
Can you talk about those a little bit? 'Cause
Oh, yes.
That's, please, like, let's dig in, man. Dig in.
This one, I was okay. So, but just going back to the time slipping, I think the time slip comes back to something that happened there in 1667, because back in 1667, it was the site of the last ever seaborne invasion of England. And it was the Dutch this time who, pesky Dutch, were trying to get in. And at the time, the fort was being run by someone called Captain Nathaniel Darrell. And he fought off, I'm sure it was around 1600, 1700 Dutch off those beaches, despite being injured himself. And his group was what became the British Marine Commandos eventually, about 200 years later. And when you read the accounts, like the diary accounts of what happened that day, there would have been men yelling, there was guns going off, there was screaming. And I think that's what people step back into, because that is probably one of the most energy-filled things that had ever happened to the fort back in 1667. Now, what was interesting is the investigation I'm going to talk about now, and I've investigated there about 3 or 4 times, like officially at night, but I've gone through there during the day, and it's so big, you can have other people there and you're still on your own. And
Right.
you know what I mean? And now the older son is into it. If we ever go there, he goes with a couple of gadgets, and we find somewhere where there's no members of the public. I mean, we are members of the public, but no other members of the public. And we'll sit there and do sort of EVP sessions and things. It's just to give him experience of what to do, what to be careful of, and ideas. Anyway, so it was another investigation I was doing there. It's probably, I'm trying to think when I was there, about 2 years ago. It was cold. And what was interesting is there was a lady who'd come along. It was a public investigation, and she'd come along, and she was a psychic, or is a psychic actually, and she said to me, I've had some visions about this place before I came here. And I'm like, okay, fire away. And one of the other team members had said, look, Penny knows this place inside out. If you picked up on something, she'd probably be able to tell you what it is. Anyway, she'd written down the number 67. And I was thinking, okay, I think I know what that would be. And the other thing she'd written down, she said, I'm seeing like aeroplanes. And she didn't know anything about aeroplanes. She said, I'm seeing aeroplanes, but they're the really old-fashioned ones with 2 wings. And I was like, oh, biplane. And she went, yeah, but they haven't got the British like bullseye marking on. They've got like weird, I don't think they're English planes. Now, the 67 one, I was able to say quite quickly, well, I'm pretty sure that would relate to July 1667, the last seaborne invasion of England. Darrell fought off over 1,000 Dutch soldiers. It was, he stopped them getting into England. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I said, but the aircraft one, that's the interesting one, because Felixstowe Docks next door used to be the Royal Naval Air Station until just after the end of the First World War. And most people don't know that, because none of the buildings are there. It's just full of big boats and containers now. Now, I knew this because of knowing the history of the air, and also I love aviation. But what I also knew, and I've confirmed this when I've gone to the National Archives in London, is one of the jobs that this place used to do was to do reverse engineering of enemy aircraft. So,
Wow.
So they would have had non-English aircraft flying around. And she'd seen that.
Interesting.
Which I found, most it's unless you dig into the museum, it doesn't tell you about the former Royal Naval Air Station that was next door. So that was quite an interesting one. But yes, so a lot of the public had gone. So we were, because it was so cold, a lot of people gave up. I'm one of those, put another jumper on, keep going. And we were in this room, and this room, according to the archives, would have been one of the officers' bedrooms, come sort of function room type. It would have been the officers' area. And The doorway, the only way I can explain it was like one of those doorways that's almost like an L shape. So you have a door in, and then you have to go through this tiny porch. You sort of turn left to go through the next door, which is at an L shape angle, to get into the room. And we were all sat on the floor calling out, as you do. And we did actually have a cat ball which we'd immobilised that kept triggering on certain questions. And the standing joke is I'm a massive fan of Wing Commander Guy Gibson, who flew in the Dam Busters. I love him. I always joke if I'd been around then, I would have stalked him and proposed to him. I absolutely adore him. And supposedly he was communicating with me. I don't necessarily believe it was him, but it was funny. Anyway, next thing we know is the door, like the L-shaped door, opens and hits the REM pod that we'd put near it. And the REM pod sounded, and we thought, okay, it's the door, it's breaking the magnetic frequency thing. And I think, I can't remember if it was me or one of the others, because there was 3 of us in there, said, can you shut the door, please? It's cold. And there's no draft, because I held up a piece of paper to see if there was a draft. I went through the whole room to see if there was a draft that could be causing this door to open and shut. The door shut. And we're like, okay, we did this about 4 times, and we've got it on camera the last time, I think. And it was like, oh, that's a really neat trick. Can you open it again? And it was a bit of a, come on, can you open the door? Can you open the door? Door opens. We did that 4 or 5 times, getting it to open and shut on command.
I'm just going to pause right there. Did you shut a door right now by any chance?
Me? No.
Yeah, because I distinctly heard a door close.
When you said that.
No, no.
Did you hear it, Mike?
Yeah, I did.
I did. My husband's moving around in the background, but
maybe
he wasn't.
That's what's going on.
Maybe that's what I distinctly heard a door shut.
I can't hear him. I couldn't hear him moving around, so maybe it's the mic is. But no, I haven't opened or shut a door myself.
I'm glad there's not something going on.
He's shaking his head. He didn't move a door. He literally just stood up to go and get something.
Oh, boy.
Okay, that's a little odd, because I distinctly heard the sound of a door shut, and we'll have it on audio.
Yeah, I'll
very
leave it
good.
there.
Leave it in, because it's very interesting timing.
But the thing is, even though I'm skeptical, I believe, but I'm skeptical. So between all these instances, I'm walking around, I'm looking to see if I can move around, because none of us were moving. We're all just sat on the floor. We're not making the floorboards move to make a door. We're all quite experienced investigators. But I get up, I'm shutting one door to see if it caught, I don't know what you'd call it, but
cross
the airflow.
breeze.
Yep. Yeah, would cause couldn't get anything. There was like an open chute to the next room. I've got my hand in front of that to see if there's any breeze. We know there was no one in the next room because that was locked. You couldn't get in it, so nobody could have got into that one. But we got it to open and shut. But what was really interesting, is that before the door would move, the REM pod would sound. So before the door actually moved towards the REM pod started sounding. And I must admit, the fact that all 4 of us who were there watching are all quite seasoned, there was a lot of swearing in excited swearing.
Yeah.
You can imagine. So yeah, I've had stuff. But the other thing I had there, which you're going to love this one. So this bath area that I've mentioned before, that's been like the focus of everything. Because I'd had experiences there before, I went and sat in there on my own by this big old steel bath. Now you would think a big old steel bath, and it wasn't a warm day, would be cold, wouldn't you? Because of the metal. There's no heating in there. There's no hot water.
Sure.
There's nothing. I put a REM pod inside it, just, for giggles. But I also put a thermometer, like a temperature gauge, next to it. The temperature gauge heated up as though there was water in it. That's the only thing I can think of.
Really?
But what was even more interesting is I was getting nothing in this room. I was on my own. Actually, no, I wasn't on my own, because somebody was stood at the doorway filming to see if they could pick anything up. But I'll admit, after half an hour of getting nothing, getting no responses, getting nothing through, no noises, nothing, I got a bit bored. And so I thought, the fort's got so many places, I'll go and try another place. So I'd gone almost to the other side of the fort, and I could hear this noise, and it was like something screaming. And somebody texted me on my phone and said, Penny, can you get back to that REM pod? I have never heard a REM pod make this noise. Ever. It was screaming. And I just and the lady who's the psychic medium, who'd come up with the 67, she went, I think you're wanted. And I walked back in there and I thought, okay, if it was my child having a meltdown, what would I do? And I was just like, it's okay, I'm back. I just went over to see some friends. And you heard it go from to It was like something had been having a panic attack. I put my hand as if I thought if someone's in that bath who's panicking, I would normally console them, like be a mother.
Yeah, right.
And as soon as I put my hand in, the REM pod just started going, like it was like something was calming down, and the temperature gauge went up again. But every time
strange.
Every time I moved away, it would start screaming. Now, what was interesting is I did have an Ovilus running at the time, because I like to have lots of different things going just to see if any corroborate each other. So I don't take just one piece of equipment as being confirmation that something's trying to communicate. But if I get the same thing through on 3 or 4 pieces at the same time, it's to me it's worth exploring. And at the same time that I got the name Robert come through on my Ovilus, the psychic turned round. She couldn't see my Ovilus and the sound was off, and she went, I'm getting the name Robert at the same time. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I said, is your first name Robert? And it didn't sound. And I said, is your surname Robert? And the REM pod went again. Okay, so we're talking to someone whose surname's Roberts. And I was asking, when I said, did you because I knew they'd meant to be in a suicide there. I said, did you take your own life? And nothing. Were you murdered? Oh, okay. It was direct questions and answers. I can't remember the other stuff I asked. Then after the event, and I was a couple of days later, once I'd, sleep deprived had gone, I started researching. And I found in April 1914, Harold Roberts, sapper, had shot himself. He was 20 years old. But the thing was, he had apparently been in that area where these ablution block is with his colleagues, had just walked out. Next thing they heard was a gunshot, and he had shot himself in the temple in the the parade ground, which is just outside.
Right.
And that's sad enough. So this is before World War I, so it wasn't someone who was scared. Didn't even know in April 1914 we were going to really be at war, sort of 4 or 5 months later. But the weird thing was, he had just got engaged. So he'd just got engaged to, apparently, according to his mum, the love of his life. He apparently loved being a soldier. His friends said he never showed any indication that he was unhappy. And he, to me, and apparently he was found with a letter on his person, but the coroner never made the letter public because he said the letter was not applicable to the suicide. But they ruled it suicide by temporary insanity. So he could have a proper burial, because if it was suicide, right, normal suicide, they wouldn't allow you to be buried in consecrated ground even back then. But the thing was, from the stuff he was telling me, I don't think it was a suicide. I think someone killed him.
Interesting.
Because they said where the gun was found, it was incredibly close to his person. Now, if you think about putting a gun to your temple and firing, the gun, you're either going to cramp up as you fire and holding onto the gun as you fall to the ground, or the gun's going to drop. Now, a gun's going to bounce on concrete, so it's not necessarily going to be right next to you. I wondered if at 20 years old, I also found out that even though his mum was known as a Mrs. Roberts, she wasn't a Mrs. He didn't have a listed birth father. So, was he close to his mum? Was that why he was latching on to me? Because he wanted to tell someone, I did not take my own life. I was murdered. And that's why he latched on to me, because he sensed a mother. I don't know. But there was to find a Roberts who did die there. And it wasn't suicide, but it was one of those. Wow. But honestly, I have nobody who was there, and a few of them were gadget people, had never heard a REM pod make this noise before. It was genuinely like it was screaming. Like screaming.
Well, the whole thing is really interesting. Like, I'm a massive gadget skeptic, like huge, but what's fascinating to me about that entire thing is the fact that you were able to trace it back in actual historical documents. And to me, that's where that gets significant. You start to have to look at that a little bit harder. And I mean, it's so interesting. I think the stories that some of the energies there have to tell us, you know, in these types of situations. And it's, that's, I mean, how can you not look at that and think something happened? Like, there's something went on there that is a little bit past explanation, especially when you've got somebody who's, you know, who picked up on the name, and then, you know, the machine came up with the same. Very, 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 very interesting.
I mean, I'm a skeptic when it comes to equipment. I like using it because it's fun, but I do sort of. I'm very much, you know, when my son, the one who I'm training, will say, "Oh, my ovilus has said this," and I'm like, "Okay, don't take that as verbatim. Let's see what else happens." And when you get corroboration, like I think him and I were doing an investigation at somewhere called Colchester Castle in Essex, and I've taught myself how to channel energy. Can't do it all the time. It's a work in progress. But I was doing it, and he'd never seen me do it before. And I said to him, look, if it seems like I'm getting upset, if it seems like I'm not with it, don't worry. I can bring myself out of it. Just observe. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to hurt myself, stop me. But otherwise, just anyway. And he said it was really weird because he said you were out of it, and you were pointing over and saying, there's a woman there. And he said at the same time, girl, corner, came up on my device. And he didn't tell me this until afterwards, because I wouldn't have been able to hear him anyway, because I was kind of out of it. But then I could feel myself start crying. I could feel a tear going down my cheek, and at the same time his device, and I hadn't said anything, neither had he, his device said, woman crying. And when things like that, it's a bit like, you could explain it, but it's you know, it's a bit odd. It's a bit odd.
No, I hear you. I think it's the whole thing is just really cool. This whole location is fascinating.
It's brilliant. Yeah. It's honestly, it's one that. But the thing is, I am a real, Team Landguard because a lot of people go to this place called Harwich Redoubt, which is over the way, and there was one of the guys who actually saw the door incident. He was again seasoned investigator. His name's Wayne Seaton, really good investigator, ex-military man, ex-RAF. So he sometimes uses that to sort of, if we want to do almost like a reenactment, he'll go into RAF mode, if you know what I mean, to try and stimulate something. And he's done a couple of the forts in that area, and he was like, oh, you know, this is just big, it's nothing special. And I was like, dude, wait until the end of the night and then tell me what you think of it. At the end of the night, he was using expletives to describe how good the place was, and was like, when can we come back again? He said, this one blows the others around here out the water. And it does. It really does. It's, even if you ignore the history of it. But what I found interesting is this Bath incident. Is that the World War I soldier that people have seen? Have they seen him almost like he's hanging because he's trying to sort of get over, I was killed here? And they've seen that because that's how their brain is associated with someone being killed, is being hanged. I don't know. But he would have been in that right uniform. I do wonder if that's who my son saw 6-7 years beforehand, who's been trying to communicate and find someone who could actually not freak out, but work out his story and had the ability to go off and mention his name, because that might be it. He might just want to have his name mentioned in real life with someone saying, did he really take his own life? Did he really do that? Or did somebody get away with murder? I actually think it's the latter. I really do.
So really interesting. Do. Well, you've made us Team Landguard too. So there's this is really, really cool, Penny. Before we wrap this up, we got to have you talk about Haunted Histories and where people can listen and find this, because it's so interesting. And if you are into British humor, people, this is the place you need to go. So give
I don't just interview Brits. I don't just interview Brits, though. I do interview people from all over the place. I mean, I listened to your podcast with Mark Wallbank recently, and actually he's coming up as a guest in the next few months.
He's fantastic.
And him and I try to out-sarcastic each other, and it's pretty even when we get going.
Yeah.
Because I have to say to people, like the Mark you see on Facebook, he's actually not quite that sort of scary. He's actually, it's just he doesn't use many words when he doesn't need to, when he's writing stuff. But yeah, he's coming up as a guest soon. So yeah, Haunted Histories, my podcast. I started it, it's about 11 years ago. I think it's about 11 years ago now, actually. Maybe not quite that long. And you can find it anywhere you find your podcast, so Spotify, Apple, all those kind of places. I also have a website, hauntedhistories.co.uk, which I put the links up on there, and I've got my Facebook page, Haunted Histories, which I always post the links on there as well. It's also, if you like reading rather than listening, I have 6 books out now. My 6th one just came out. You can get them on Amazon, or you can order direct from me if you want a signed copy or plus postage. But yeah, so Haunted Histories, I came up with it. There's a story behind that. So I was at a place called Rougham Airfield, which was a US airfield during World War II. And a friend and I, we were coming, sort of larking about. We were larking about, and she didn't want to do a piece to get a live, Facebook Live. And I said, I'll do it. And one of the guys who was there, he turned around and he said, have you ever thought of doing a podcast? And I was like, I wouldn't know where to start. And he said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I think history isn't used enough in the paranormal field. I think too many people are scared of it because they think it's boring. They don't see the validity of using history to back up your evidence. And he says, do one like that then. So it originally started with me doing the history of a place and then interviewing someone about the paranormal. And it's kind of morphed into what it is now, where it's like an open conversation where I'm throwing in history bits, they're putting in the paranormal bits. But it's even swapped now because I have a foot in both camps. I get historians on, and they'll do the history, and I'll do the paranormal. So that's where they can get hold of it. So the most recent episode was to do with Penhurst Asylum, because I'll be in Penhurst for their Paracon mid-May, and so I got Gina Bangston and Bob Christopher on to talk, and we could have talked for hours about education and care, residential care for people with additional needs. It was quite an interesting subject. But I have guests on, so we talk about a place. So I'm a bit like we've done on this tour. I'll be looking at the history of a place, the paranormal stuff associated with a place, and yeah, that's Haunted Histories. But it is what you see is what you get. It's not expertly edited or cleaned up or any of that. If I break into hysterics halfway through because something's happened that's really, really funny, that gets kept in. I don't edit that stuff out. I remember when I was doing...
I wouldn't want you to edit it out, man. I wouldn't want you to edit it. It would be wrong. Like, it would be fundamentally wrong.
My days. I did one a few years ago, and I used to... My old house, my little studio was under my stairs so I was out of the way. And it was quite late at night, and I'm interviewing these guys. They were actually from Fright Night. I think we were talking about a place called Kelvedon Hatch Nuclear Bunker. And as I'm chatting to them, this huge spider just dropped from nowhere onto the envelope that was next to my leg. And I'm like staring at this spider. I swear to God it was staring at me. And I'm not particularly scared. I didn't want it right next to me, and it was huge. I mean, we're talking sort of, nuclear sort of waste type spider, and I'm trying to keep the conversation going, and it's live. This was a live one. This is why I couldn't stop. I was broadcasting live, and all of a sudden, I think it was Kerry. She goes, "Are you all right?" And I went, "I'm sorry about this, but I may just have to move slightly." And this is on air. And she goes, "Why?" I said, this huge spider's just landed by my leg, and I think it's contemplating me for dinner, the way it's looking at me. And this was kept in the podcast because I thought it was funny, and it just but yeah, I unfortunately we were just wrapping up as well, so I just kept very still, and spider kept still staring at me, and then I picked him up and put him outside. I think it was a him. Picked him up and put him outside. But it was just one of those, I kept going. And then they noticed that I was a bit like, I couldn't think what to say. I told them why, and this was all on air. So yeah, I don't. What you see is what you get. No filters.
That's what we love about you.
Oh, thank you. But that's Haunted Histories, and yeah, 6 books. I've just released the 6th, which is called Becoming Peggy. And the reason it's called that is the guys from Haunted magazine years ago nicknamed me Peggy because of my initials PG. And it kind of took on a life of its own. And I thought, rather than fight against it, I might as well embrace it. And so Beyonce has Sasha Fierce as her stage character. I'm Peggy. When I'm paranormal, I'm Paranormal Peggy. And it's called Becoming Peggy because a lot of people said, why don't you write a book about your life up till now and why you're doing what you're doing and throw some history in it as well. So that's what I've done.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, we love it, and we're just so glad that you could come on the show. And
Thank you.
We're gonna drag you back on here eventually. So
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
It's gotta happen.
I love getting to chat about things I'm passionate about, and hopefully people like that passion and they realise it's genuine. It's not put on. There's so much more about Landguard I could tell you, that experiences I've had there, and actually how I've sort of confirmed what people, or not debunked what people were seeing. Actually, the opposite, explained to them why they were could have been seeing that, and using my history knowledge. And it's a place that does not stop giving. And I'm so pleased that I found it sort of 10 years ago, and that Scaredy Cat might have run away, but I didn't, and I've had a relationship with it ever since.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Penny. This has been incredible. Everybody, Haunted Histories, definitely tune in. Check out Peggy's books. All of this stuff is going to be in the show
Call
notes.
her Peggy.
She did call me Peggy, yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I have to now.
Yeah.
Did Paul Stevenson bribe you to do that? Because
Yeah.
he bribed people to call me Peggy.
Oh,
well, he keeps trying to bribe me to keep writing for the magazine. So I mean, but everybody check it out, and we're gonna have it all in the show notes and whatnot, so people can easily find you, go read the books, and tune in, because it's a really, really great show. So this has been awesome. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again really soon.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you both, and I say I could listen to the Canadian accent all night. A boot. Yeah.
And we are back. What a good conversation we had, and I really enjoyed that. I love talking to historians so much.
She is so much fun, and her British humor makes it all the better. She's so funny, and she delivers this stuff in such a great and entertaining way that you can't help but just fall in love with the place she's talking about.
It made me want to visit more places in the UK, that's for sure. I mean, I want her to tag along and point things out to me and say, hey, Mike, this is what happened here, and this is where this went on, and all that kind of stuff. Because you go to a place, and you don't really know the history that's there unless you've got somebody like Penny, who is really well versed in it and can make the place. Yeah, it's a tree with a rock on the side, and then somebody like her takes that and makes it so interesting
and so much fun. And I think history sort of gets the brunt of boring sometimes.
Right.
If you've got the wrong person heading up that history lesson, you forget pretty quickly about what's going on. And she does this really, really great job of being so fun and so funny. And this location is really, really worthy of that. It's got such a deep history. And I love the fact that she brings her son to some of these locations, because, as she mentioned, her son has autism,
right,
and is able to tap into some of this stuff in a way that I don't think the average Joe can do. So I really love that she brings her history of taking care of other people, and tuning into people that may be more sensitive to this stuff, and manages to just bring that with her. She brings that information and knowledge with her, and I think it's so invaluable.
Yep, totally. She made this place so interesting. I really want to visit. That's all I can think about is now I need to get on a plane.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. Well, I mean, I think we start planning that basically after most episodes where we're going somewhere. By the end of the episode, it's like, well, how can we? So when are we going? I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And I hope you guys all out there feel the same way, because man, it puts interest back into a world that often feels like it's all been explored already.
Another fantastic episode. So thank you for joining us on this eerie expedition. Dear listeners, pip pip cheerio, etc.
And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until next time, stay curious, friends.
Where's my tea? Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker Paranormal Research and Teachings and Good Egg Studios. This podcast is part of the Curious Cast podcast network. Theme music by Corey Johnson of Catalyst Records in Edmonton, Alberta. You can learn more about Morgan Knudsen at entityseeker.ca and learn more about me, Mike Brown, and listen to my show, Dark Poutine, at darkpoutine.com. Feel free to email the show at supernaturalcircumstances@gmail.com.